Imagine a world without refrigerators, without freezers, without even a corner store to grab a snack. Now picture yourself in the Arctic, where winter's bite drops to 50 degrees Celsius and summer's fleeting warmth barely thaws the tundra. Food isn't just a meal here, it's survival, a precious resource that can mean the difference between life and death. For thousands of years, the Inuit people have mastered this challenge, not with high-tech gadgets, but with snow, ice, and a wisdom so deep it feels like the land itself whispered its secrets. Their igloos weren't just shelters. They were the world's first smart fridges, their food caches the original pantries. How did they keep food fresh for weeks, even months? In one of Earth's harshest environments? Buckle up for a 60-minute journey into the coolest kitchens ever built. Let's start with the igloo, a structure so iconic it's practically the Arctic's calling card. Most of us picture igloos as cozy snow huts, maybe with a family inside, sipping something warm while the wind howls outside. But these domes were far more than homes. They were culinary game changers. In a land where the cold could freeze your breath mid-air, the Inuit turned snow into a natural refrigerator, keeping food fresh for weeks without a plug or a power bill. How? It all comes down to a brilliant dance of physics and design. Snow, turns out, is a master insulator. Those fluffy flakes aren't just pretty. They're packed with tiny air pockets that trap heat like a quilt, shielding the igloo's interior from the Arctic's brutal winds. Step inside a well-built igloo, and you'd find a stable, just below freezing microclimate, hovering around 28 to 30 degrees, even when the outside world plummets to 58 degrees. That's not just cozy. It's a food preservation superpower. The igloo's dome shape was key, too. Cold air, being heavier, sank to the floor, while warmer air rose to the sleeping platform. This created natural temperature zones, like a fridge with a freezer drawer and a crisper, except Mother Nature was the engineer. The Inuit knew how to work these zones like culinary wizards. Perishable foods, think seal meat or Arctic char, went near the floor or into carved niches in the igloo's walls, where the cold was sharpest. These snow shelves were the Arctic's answer to a fridge's vegetable bin, holding up to 15 kilograms of meat or fish per niche. A typical family igloo might have 4 to 6 of these, enough to feed everyone for weeks when hunting was scarce. Some families even built raised ice platforms for meat, keeping it away from the warmer upper areas where people slept. It was meal prep without the plastic containers or the drawer of mismatched lids we all pretend to organize. Building these storage spaces was an art form. Inuit builders wielded knives of bone, antler, or metal, carving alcoves and shelves directly into the igloo's walls with the precision of a sculptor. Every niche was sized just right, big enough for a haul of fish, small enough to keep the cold locked in. These weren't just functional, they were 100% biodegradable, melting away in spring without a trace. No repairman needed, no software updates, just snow and skill. If your fridge at home could boast that kind of efficiency, your power company would send you a thank you note. This natural refrigeration was a lifeline. Studies show meat stored in an igloo's coldest zones could stay fresh for up to 3 weeks, a godsend during brutal winters when storms made hunting impossible. Compare that to the sad lettuce wilting in your fridge after a few days, and you start to see the genius. The system was elegantly simple. No wires, no moving parts, just the Inuits' deep understanding of their environment. They didn't fight the cold. They harnessed it, turning the Arctic's greatest challenge into a kitchen ally. But igloos were just the start. For longer-term storage, when winter's grip tightened and fresh hunts were a distant hope, the Inuit had other tricks up their parkas. One of the most remarkable was fermentation, a process that sounds like a science experiment but was pure survival magic. Picture a successful hunt. A walrus or seal brought back to camp, its meat a treasure too precious to waste. The Inuit got to work fast, before bacteria could spoil their prize. They'd slice the meat into precise chunks, not too big, not too small, to ferment evenly like chefs prepping for a Michelin-starred dish without the fancy knives. These chunks were packed into containers made from nature's own materials: seal skins, animal bladders, or stomachs, sewn tight to create a near-airtight seal. These weren't just bags. They were fermentation vessels, letting just enough microbial action happen to preserve the meat without letting it rot. Think of them as the Arctic's Tupperware, minus the satisfying burp when you close the lid. For bigger hauls, the Inuit dug pits in the permafrost, nature's deep freezer where temperatures stayed steady year-round. These caches were lined with stones to keep out predators, then sealed with more rocks. No GPS markers, just memory, and trust in the land's landmarks. The science behind this was mind-blowing, even if the Inuit didn't call it science. They'd learned through centuries of observation that cold slowed harmful bacteria just enough for beneficial ones to work their magic. The result? Foods like igloos, a delicacy made from walrus or whale meat buried for 6 months or more. Over time, the meat transformed. Fats broke down, proteins shifted, and the texture turned almost cheese-like, with a flavor so intense it could make a modern foodie pause. Sour, funky, and aged, it wasn't for the faint-hearted. But for the Inuit, it was life. Packed with vitamin C, igloos helped fend off scurvy in a land where fruit was a fantasy. Some fermented meats stayed edible for over 2 years, a shelf life that puts canned soup to shame. Timing was everything. Too short, and the meat might harbor pathogens. Too long, and it could decompose beyond eating. This wasn't written in cookbooks. It was taught, generation to generation, through stories and hands-on lessons. The Inuit were food scientists. Without lab coats, their knowledge a living library of survival. Fermentation wasn't the only long-game strategy. When they wanted food to stay fresh-tasting, the Inuit turned to seal oil, a preservation method so clever it's like the Arctic invented shrink wrap. After a hunt, they'd harvest blubber, cutting it into small cubes and letting summer's mild warmth render it into oil. A single seal could yield 4 gallons, enough to preserve dozens of pounds of meat. Fish or meat strips were submerged in this oil, which formed a barrier against air and bacteria. It was like edible armor, locking in freshness for up to 6 months. The containers? Seal stomachs, intestines, or even hollowed driftwood, some holding up to 20 gallons. Archaeologists have found stone vessels used for over a century, passed down like heirlooms that actually mattered. Unlike fermentation, oil-preserved food could be rinsed and cooked to taste almost fresh, and the oil itself was a nutritional powerhouse, brimming with omega-3s and vitamins A, D, and E. Every meal was a 2-for-1, protein plus a nutrient boost, no kale smoothies required. For food on the move, drying was the go-to. In the Arctic, where sunlight is scarce half the year, the Inuit mastered cold air drying, using the region's dry, frigid winds to pull moisture from meat and fish. After a hunt, they'd slice their catch into thin strips, half an inch thick, perfect for even drying, and hang them on racks of driftwood or bone. These racks, often elevated to dodge foxes, caught the Arctic's low-humidity air, sometimes drier than a modern dehydrator. Fish like Arctic char became nipku in 3 to 5 days, retaining 80% of their nutrients at a third of the weight. Caribou or seal took longer, up to 2 weeks, turning into a leathery, protein-packed jerky that didn't need a gas station wrapper. Dried food was a nomad's dream, lightweight, leak-proof, and mild enough to eat daily without tiring the palate. A hunter might carry 5 pounds, packing 25,000 calories for long trips. Some added smoke from driftwood or oil lamps, boosting preservation with antimicrobial magic. Stored right, smoked dried food lasted a year, ready whenever hunger struck. All this food needed protection, and the Inuits' storage solutions were as clever as their preservation. Animal intestines, stomachs, and skins became the Arctic's Ziploc bags, flexible, waterproof, and cold-resistant. Intestines were cleaned, dried, and sometimes inflated into pouches. A walrus intestine could stretch 60 feet. Seal skins were sewn into bags holding 100 pounds, sealed with sinew or bone toggles. Inside igloos, these hung from the ceiling, saving space and keeping food handy. No shattered plastic containers here, just nature's packaging, perfected. Managing this food was a science of its own. The Inuit practiced a rotation system that would make a modern chef jealous. Organ meats, liver, heart, kidneys, came first, packed with vitamins but quick to spoil. Fresh blood was drunk with snow, for instant energy. Muscle meat lasted a few days, checked daily for spoilage. Blubber, vital for its 5,000-calorie daily needs, was eaten at its peak. Preserved foods had their own timeline, dried for 3 to 6 months, fermented or oil-preserved for years. They tracked 12 stages of food aging, each with a name and purpose, all without a single label or sticky note. Nothing was wasted. Inedible parts became bait for traps, and seasonal shifts guided rationing, feasting in summer, conserving in winter. This knowledge, passed orally, was a masterclass in resourcefulness, taught by watching elders inspect, smell, and taste. No expiration dates, just instinct and memory. Survival wasn't just individual, it was communal. When a hunt brought a whale or caribou herd, the haul was too big for one family. Enter shared caches, the Arctic's food banks. Pits dug into permafrost lined with stones held enough for multiple families. Coastal groups built elevated platforms or submerged stone chambers, cooled by the sea. Some caches, used for 70 years, were community landmarks, their locations marked by stone patterns and shared knowledge. These caches weren't free-for-alls. Strict rules governed access. Contributors could withdraw, and non-hunters like elders got shares. Elders decided when to tap the cache, ensuring it lasted through lean times. Built to deter polar bears with heavy stone covers, these stores kept food colder than individual igloos, preserving it longer. They were also social hubs, where hunters swapped stories and skills while prepping food, a real community network, not just a hashtag. The Inuits' food system was a symphony of snow, oil, air, and cooperation. Igloos turned cold into a fridge. Fermentation and oil made food last year's. Drying fueled nomads and caches bound communities. It wasn't just about eating. It was about thriving in a land that tests every step. Today, as Inuit balance tradition and with modern life, their methods remind us, sometimes the simplest solutions, snow, a knife,